Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Shabbos Daf Tzadikei. We're on Daf Tzadik Dalet Amud Beis. 4 lines from the bottom. The Gemara will analyze for us 3 remaining activities on our list in our Mishnah, which were the subject of a machlokes between the Shitas Chachamim, who maintained that they are merely asur midrabanan, rabbinically prohibited, whereas Rabbi Lezer maintains they are considered to be full-fledged malachos min haTorah, which result in a chiyuv chatas. Says the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom, B'chein Godelas v'chulu. Godelas, which means the Isha braiding her hair, Kechelas, applying her eye paint, Upeikeses, styling her hair in a manner which she spins her hair, where according to Rabbi Lezer, these are regarded as malachos d'oraisa. Says the Gemara, R'shumayim l'chayv, on account of what is she chayv? What malachos do these things resemble? Says the Gemara, Amar Rab Abin, Amar Rabbi Yosef Chanina, Godelas Mishum Reges. When she braids her hair, it is a form of weaving. So she's chayv mishum oireges. It is a telah, the derivative of the melacha of oireg. Koicheles, applying this eye paint, mishum koiseves. It's as though she's writing. Therefore, the chiyuv here is due to the melacha of koisev. It is a telah of writing. Poikeses, styling the hair in a manner where she's spinning the hair, mishum toiva. It's as though she's spinning threads, is a telah of the melacha of toiva. So in summary, braiding is a telah of weaving. The eye paint, a telah of writing. Spinning the hair, styling in that manner, is a telah of spinning threads. Amar Rabbanon, Kameder Ravo. They challenged this in front of Ravo. They said, "V'chiderech ariga b'kach." Is this considered to be normal fashion, normal manner of weaving? She's styling her hair. She's braiding her hair. Taisa explains it's going to unravel sooner or later. It's not something which is miskayim, not something which lasts. It's not considered to be derech ariga. V'chiderech ksiva b'kach, applying this eye paint, is considered to be derech of writing. V'chiderech tvia b'kach, styling her hair, is that a form? Is that considered to be a usual manner of spinning? She's merely styling her hair. It has no relation to spinning, which is related to threads. You're making it into a thread. You're spinning the fibers into a thread. Here she's merely styling her hair. Ella Amar Ravo. So Ravo responded, yes, indeed. To me, it was explained in the name of that same Ad Amar, Rabbi Yosef Chanina, a little bit differently. Applying this eye paint is due to the melacha of dyeing, of coloring. So although it's not related to writing, but she's enhancing her appearance by adding the color, this is a form of melacha of tzeveya. So it's a telah of that melacha. Goideles, braiding upeikeses, and spinning the hair, mishum baina. It's a derivative of melacha, a telah of the melacha of baina, of building. She's fixing herself up in this manner. Says the Gemara, baina? V'chiderech binyan b'kach is considered to be derech of building? Says the Gemara, in yes, kedadaresh Reb Shimon Menasya. The pasuk says, Vayiven Hashem alikim esat seila. So Hashem built fashioned the side of Adam Rishon into his wife Chava. The pasuk uses the term Vayiven. This teaches us Malamed. Shekila Kadosh Baruch Hu leChava. Hashem braided Chava's hair, ve'evia etzel Adam, and presented her in this manner to Adam Rishon. Shekein b'kar chayam, because in those cities by the sea, Kern, they call the Kaliyasa, a person who braids hair, Ban Yasa, a builder. So braiding hair, fashioning hair in this manner, is a form of building. Therefore, Rabbi Lezer maintains that when it comes to Shabbos, we consider it to be related to the melacha of baina, and there's a chiyuv chatas involved. So in summary, according to this version, applying the eye paint is connected with tzeveya, and braiding, goideles, and poikeses, spinning the hair in a specific manner, is related to the melacha of baina. Apparently the Chachamim disagree. They hold beautifying a person in this manner doesn't really involve a melacha d'oraisa. It's not considered to be a significant act of malacha, and therefore it is only considered to be an as isur midrabanan. Continues the Gemara, Tani, we have a brayso which explains as follows. Reb Shimon Lazar Omer, so he's expounding on the sheet of Rabbi Lezer, and he says that you meant to know as follows. Even according to Rabbi Lezer, that regards these things as malachos min haTorah, goideles, koicheles, upoikeses, la'atzma patura. If she does it on herself, to herself she's potter. L'chaverta chayeves. Only if she does it for a companion, for a friend, she's chayev. Why? Explains Rashi. Let's see Rashi inside, up on the top of the Amud, beginning with the words la'asma batura. Explains Rashi. She'ena yichol livnei snefesh. She can't build properly. She can't fashion it properly. Ve'en derech binyan al isha l'chaverta. It only applies properly to an isha who does it for a friend. She'roya va'oisa. She can see what she's doing properly and achieve proper results. So even according to Reb Lezer, this only applies when she does it for a friend. Continues the Gemara. V'chein haya Reb Shimon Reb Lezer Omer. Mishum Reb Lezer. Another halacha named Reb Lezer. Isha lo yisaver srak aponeh. An isha should not apply the makeup on her face and pay should say vas, because once again this is a form of dyeing. And according to Reb Lezer, it's considered to be a malacha and related to the malacha of tzeveya. Continues the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan learned in the Brisa. Hachoylef, if one milks an animal, that's considered to be a malacha. A telada of which malacha? Of dash. Dash means threshing the kernels from their, removing them from their stalks. So the essence of dash is removing something from its encasement. Milking an animal is included in that category. It's considered to be a derivative of the malacha of dash. So hachoylef, v'amachabitz. This is processing the cheese, so it places the congealed milk in a basket to allow the liquid, the whey, to drip out. That is a form of boirer. If one forms the blocks of cheese by putting together the curds, that is a form of boina, of building. So all agree that these are considered to be malachis, geres. So if one does the amount which equals a dried fig, is considered to be a malach. Continues the Brisa with another three examples which are actually a subject of a machlokes between Reb Lezer and the Chachamim. Reb Lezer maintains that they are considered to be malachis min ha-Torah, whereas the Chachamim maintain they are only asur min d'Rabbanan. What are these three things? Hamachabed, if one sweeps the floor, speaking about a earthen floor. So by doing so, he's smoothing out the floor, straightening out the bumps, the holes. It's considered to be a form of building, binyan. If a person spills out liquid to lay down the dust on the earthen floor, once again, he's going to smooth out the floor in this manner, and is considered to be boina. If one removes the honeycombs from the beehive, so according to Reb Lezer, we regard all these three things as malachos min ha-Torah. Shogag b'Shabbos, if he does it inadvertently on Shabbos, chayav chatos. His it be yontiv. If he should do it intentionally on yontiv, loika arbaim, because he committed an isser or lav, he gets malchus. Divei Reb Lezer. Now, just stop for a second. Why is removing the honeycombs from the beehive according to Reb Lezer a malacha? We're going to learn later. He learns it from a pasuk. So removing something from its source, in this case, is considered to be a malacha. But what about on yontiv? We know that oichal nefesh is mutar on yontiv. The malachas that are related to producing food for human consumption. So why is removing the honeycombs considered to be a malacha on Yom Tov? It says Taisus, apparently we're speaking about that the honey is inedible, or perhaps it's very close to the conclusion of Yom Tov, he won't be able to eat it. So therefore we regard it as a malacha. So this is the Shita of Reb Lezer, who considers them to be full-fledged malachas. V'chachamim oimrim echad zeh ve'echad zeh, whether on Shabbos or Yom Tov, einay ela mishum shvus. They are merely regarded as asum d'Rabban. We're speaking about the three last items on the list of Mechabed, Merabetz. They don't consider that to be an Issa D'Oraisa because it's a Davar Sheini Meskav, and he has no intention of smoothing out the floor. They don't consider it to be inevitable that result will be achieved. However, according to Reb Lezer, Taisus explains, he considers it to be inevitable. The act of sweeping or lying down the dust will actually smooth out the earth. It's considered to be a psik reisha, it's inevitable, and therefore it's considered to be a malacha. And regarding removing the honeycombs, the Chacham disagree with this whole concept. It's not considered to be a malacha d'oraisa. Rather, all three things, sweeping, mechabed, merabetz, and roi dechal dvash, are merely asum d'Rabban. Continues the Gemara, Rav Nachman bar Guria, Ikla, he encountered, he came l'nahar da. Bo minei, they asked him the following question: Choylev, if one milks an animal, m'shumai chayev. What form of malach is he doing? Why is he chayiv? Amrlu mishum chaylev, because he milked. Because of the malach of chaylev. Mechabitz. Mishumai mechayev. If a person processes this cheese, separating the liquid from the solid, mishum mayim mechayev, due to what malacha is he chayev? Amar lo, once again, mishum mechabetz, because of the malacha of mechabetz. Megabe mishum mayim mechayev. When a person forms the block of cheese, what form of malacha is he doing? Amar lo mishum megabe. Amar le, so they weren't too impressed with his responses, his seeming inability to figure out the source root of these various activities, where they're derived from, which malachas they come from. Amalei, so they responded to him, Rabach, your Rebbe, Kotel Kani Ba'agmava. He was a reed cutter in the swamp. That was his profession. He was an unlearned fellow. He didn't explain to you the reason for these things. Asa Shol B'Midrasha. So he went to Beis Medrash and he asked, indeed, what is the reason? What is the basis for these malachas? Amalei, so they told him as follows. Choylev Chayev Mishum Afarik. Milking an animal is a form of a farik, unloading. As Rashi explains, it's a telod of dash, releasing the item from its encasement, which is the act of threshing, removing the kernels from its husk, from its stalk. So here as well, when one milks an animal, is a telod of that malacha. Mechabetz, which is separating the whey, the liquid from the congealed milk. Chay mishum bayr, it's a form of bayr. Megabin, forming the blocks of cheese. Chay mishum bayna, it's a form of building. Continues the Gemara. Let's go back to the machlokes. If one sweeps, hamarabitz, he lays down the dust. Dvash, removes the honeycombs. Shogag b'Shabbos, if he does it inadvertently on Shabbos, chayav chatas. His it b'yomtiv loik arbaim divrei Belezer. Omer Belezer, my time of Belezer. What is the source of Belezer that removing a honeycomb is considered to be a malacha? Tichsiv, as it says, vayitval oisa. He dipped it biyaras hadvash, in a forest of honey. V'chima inyan yar itzel dvash. What is the connection between a forest and honey? Ela loy malach, to teach you ma yar, just as a forest. Hatoyu shemenu b'Shabbos. Chayav chatas, if one plucks from it on Shabbos, he is chayav chatas. Av chalos dvash, likewise honeycombs. Haroy dimenu b'Shabbos chayav chatas. If one removes it on Shabbos, he's chayav chatas. It is regarded as though he's removing from its source, and there's a chayav chatas. So this is Shita Reb Belezer, who contends that removing the honeycombs from the beehive is considered to be a malacha d'oraisa. Continues the Gemara, Ameimar, Shar, he allowed Zilcha to spray the liquid, to lay down the dust, b'Mechayza, in this town, in the city of Mechayza. And Rashi explains that they had the floor was made from was a stone floor, and in the entire city they had stone floors. There's no concern of smoothing out the earth. And he explained himself. Amar, he said, "Time of my Amar Rabbanon. Why did the Chachamim prohibit doing reboots, spilling this, spraying the liquid to lay down the dust? They said it's asa midrabanan. Dilma asa l'shvi gumis, because it might come to smoothing out the holes. Hachalek gumis. Here there are no holes. The floor is a stone floor." Continues the Gemara, Rava Tosfot. Ashkeche, he found the Ravina to commit star mahavla. He encountered Ravina who was distressed. He was having tsar from the dry dust, from the dry just the avak that was oila that was coming up, and it was distressing him. Va'amrila, some say it was Makshisha b'nei Rava, Makshisha the son of Rava, Ashkeche, who found the Rav Ashi to commit star mahavla. He was in distress as a result of this dry dust that was rising from the floor. Amar le, so he told him, do you not hold of what is contained in the Brisa, which says that there's a way out. Haroitzel l'rabitz is basic. If one wants to lay the dust in his home, b'Shabbos, what does he do? Maybe areva malei mayim. So he brings this large basin of water. V'reichitz panav b'zavizu. He washes his face in this corner of the room. Yodav b'zavizu, he washes his hands in the other corner. Raglav b'zavizu, his feet in the other corner. V'nimtza abayis misrabitz me'elav. As a result, the whole all the dust in the home will result in being laid down on their own, on its own. So this is mutter, because we're speaking about it. It's a Rabbanan who are concerned that it might result in him smoothing out the floor. So if he does it in an indirect way, which doesn't relate to the floor, he's washing his hands, he's washing his feet, that is mutter even l'chatchila. So you have a simple solution to your dilemma. You'll be mitzvah from the hevel here, from this dust, which is dry, which is warming up the home, which is distressing you. Why don't you just use this solution? Relates, he responded, Lava the Toy, I wasn't mindful, I forgot about this solution. Continues the Gemara, Tana, we learned in the Brisa, Isha Chachama, a wise woman, Rashi says, a daughter or a wife of Talmid Chacham, who knows this halacha, Marbetzes Beisa b'Shabbos. She lays down the dust in her home on Shabbos, Rashi says, by washing her dishes all over the floor. So this is a solution that can be applied. Concludes the Gemara. Now, the sphere like Reb Shimon that we concur, like we hold like Reb Shimon, we rule like Reb Shimon that holds that a davar she'eino miskaven is mutter. If one does an activity which results in an incidental malacha taking place, which was not part of his initial intention, that is mutter. Shari afilu l'chatchila. So according to Reb Shimon, one may even initially do this process of sprinkling the liquid to lay down the dust because the resulting possible smoothing of the earth was not his intention, it was not his kavanah, so it's merely an incidental result for which he's not held accountable. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. There's 7 lines from the bottom, beginning with the words Reb Shimon. Says Rashi, the dover shein meskaven mutter. So if something happens as a result of his activity which he had not intended to do, it's mutter to do that. This person who lays down the dust, he has no intention whatsoever to go ahead and to be madbik, to stick the offer, the earth, into the hole to smooth out his floor. He's merely intending to lay down the dust, to keep the dust down. So we're not concerned with the fact that perhaps his activity will result in smoothing out his floor. There's no concern here, and therefore even l'chatchila, he may engage in this activity. Okay, let's take a quick summary. We began with 3 activities: keicheles, applying the eye paint; goideles, braiding her hair; peikeses, forming her hair and spinning her hair. We're according to Beleza, these 3 are regarded as malachos min haTorah. The Gemara explained that if she does these things la'atzma, to herself, they are considered to be malachos. Keicheles is related to tzevea, to dying; goideles to boine, and peikeses to boine as well. According to Chachamim, if she does these things, she's pater. They're not considered to be malachos min haTorah, merely asam d'Rabbanan. The Gemara continued the 3 additional activities: choylev, milking an animal. All agree that is a teloda of dash, of threshing; mechabetz, engaging in the cheese-making process, separating the whey, the liquid. That is a form of boirer; megaben, forming those cheese blocks. That is related to the melacha of boina. The Gemara told us there are 3 additional activities. We have a machlokes again between Blezer, who considers them to be melachos deraisa. What are they? Mechabet, sweeping the floor, the earthen floor. According to Blezer, considered to be a melacha of boina because he's smoothing it out. Merabet, laying down the dust, laying down the sprinkling liquid to lay down the dust. According to Blezer as well, we regard it as a melacha of boina. And finally, the roide chalis dvash, removing the honeycombs from the beehive. According to Blezer, that is related to toilish, to plucking, to kaita, to reaping. In all 3 cases, according to Rabbanan, he is pater. In fact, the Gemara told us that even the chatchila, one may wash himself and rinse himself throughout his home, even if it result in the dust being laid down in this manner. And finally, the Gemara tells us, according to Rabbi Shimon, who holds that davar she'ein meskaven is mutter, and we indeed conclude accordingly, we're allowed to do this l'chatchila. We're allowed to go ahead, sprinkle the liquid outright, directly, to lay down the dust. There's no concern of the floor being smoothed out. That's merely incidental to davar she'ein meskaven, and it's mutter. Continues the Mishnah. Ha'toilish mi otzitz nokuf chayev. If one has an otzitz, a flower pot, which is nokuf, perforated, has a hole, and if one plucks from within this flower pot something which is growing within, for instance, a leaf, so he cuts off the leaf from this flower pot, chayav is considered to be a melacha deraisa. He did kaitzer, he reaped. Why? Because something in a perforated flower pot is regarded as mechuber lekarka. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. Rashi here is 4 lines from the bottom. Ha'toilish me'otzitz nokuf chayav. The have kimechuber. It's as though it's connected to the ground. The yonik min karka aydei nekef, because the thing growing within this otis, this flower pot, is drawing its sustenance and nutrients from the ground through this hole. Shemeiriach lachluchas akarka. It smells the lachluchas, the moisture, sustenance of the karka. Afilo hanekev b'doifna. Even if the hole is on the side of the flower pot, that is sufficient to have the moisture and sustenance come through and provide sustenance to the thing growing within. It is considered to be mechubel karka. Continues the Mishnah. What if the otis is unperforated, has no hole? There's something growing within it, and he plucks from that potter because it's considered to be detached from the ground. Now, although it's growing within this flower pot, it's not considered to be its natural habitat. Therefore, we don't regard it as mechubel karka, and if one plucks from it, he did not commit a malacha derais. Reb Shimon poiter b'zeh b'zeh. Reb Shimon says, in either case, whether the otis is unperforated or it is perforated, he is potter. Reb Shimon says anything growing within a flower pot is considered to be detached from the ground. Continues the Gemara, Romile, Abai l'Rav. So Abai asked the following kasha to Rav. V'amr, some say it was Reb Chia barav l'Rav. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Reb Shimon poiter b'zeh b'zeh. Reb Shimon says either case, he's potter. Alma apparently, Nokuf, Reb Shimon, according to Reb Shimon's opinion, even an otis which is nokuf, which is punctured, kishe'enei nokuf mashvilei. He regards it just like an otis which has no puncture. He regards it as tolish min hakarka, detached from the ground. It doesn't differentiate between a perforated one and an unperforated one. Says the Gemara, is that so over a minute? We have a kasha from a brayso of Shimon Omer, ein bei nokuf l'shei nokuf. There's no difference between a punctured otzitz and a whole, a complete otzitz which is not punctured. Ela lahachshes roim bavad. Only when it pertains to halach of hechshes roim, which means that when food which is edible gets wet through one of the 7 primary liquids, water, blood, honey, etc., it becomes huchshel l'kabel tumah. It becomes enabled to be able to receive tumah, susceptible to the contracting of tumah. So the halacha is that this only applies to produce which is detached from the ground. So the apple which is detached and gets wet, from now on it can become tummy. Now it doesn't apply to something which is attached to the ground. Otherwise every apple will be considered to be huchshel l'kabel tumah due to the rain. So it's only pertaining to something which was tolish from the karka. Shimon tells us that although I don't differentiate between something growing in an otzitz which has a hole or which doesn't have a hole, either way I regard it detached from the ground. However, when it comes to the halacha of hechshes roim, which only applies to something which is detached from the ground, I indeed will differentiate between the two things. If it's otzitz, is eidei nokuf, it's unperforated, then the thing growing within it is considered to be tolish from the karka, detached, and can become huchshel l'kabel tumah if it gets wet. However, if the otzitz is nokuf, it's punctured, in that case I will agree that anything growing within it is considered to be attached to the ground and cannot become susceptible to tumah. So we have a contradiction. Here Rav Shimon tells us that something growing within an otzitz nokuf is considered to be attached to the ground. Whereas in our Mishnah, he doesn't differentiate between the two. He says something growing in an otzitz nokuf is considered to be detached. Amalesi responded, indeed, l'kol mili, with regard to everything else, Reb Shimon ketolish mashvili. Reb Shimon regards something in an otzitz, even an otzitz nokuf, a punctured otzitz, he regards as detached. V'shani l'nyan tumah, pertaining to tumah, there's a difference. The Torah ribsa tahara tells roim, because the Torah added the purity when it comes to this subject of seeds being mekabel tumah. Shenem, as it says, al kol zera zirua sheyizareya. This is the parsha speaking about produce becoming susceptible to tumah, and the Torah uses the words al kol zera zirua sheyizareya, that only a seed which is has the form and has the form and the manner in which it's going to be sowed and planted, it's attached from the ground, it's ready to be planted, only this type of seed is liable for hechsher tumah, as opposed to something growing within a flower pot. Since it's perforated as a whole, it's punctured, it's still somewhat, even according to Rav Shimon, somewhat related to the ground, somewhat mechuber lekarka. And therefore, when it comes strictly to this halacha of hechsher tumah, we excluded from becoming liable, from being susceptible to mekabel tumah. In this regard, we consider it to be attached to the ground. It's not considered to be zera zerua she zereya, and therefore cannot be mekabel tumah. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. So Rashi here is 6 lines from the top, beginning with the words asher yizareya. Says Rashi, the Torah teaches us that the only thing that can become huchshar lekabel tumah, susceptible to tumah when it gets wet, is if it's in the format, in the form, kederech she'adam moitzi l'zriya, in the manner in which a person would take it out for planting. L'mu'utei mechuber kodu. This comes to exclude something which is even somewhat attached to the ground, for instance, placed in this atetz nakov, in this perforated flower pot. Lahachi ahani zriya yiseri dikra. That's what we learn from the repetition of the term zera, zerua, ashi, zereya. The Torah is teaching us that it needs to be strictly something which has the format, which is suitable for planting, and we exclude from here the produce growing in this atetz nakov. It is excluded from the concept of susceptibility to tumah. Says Rashi, umiu, nevertheless, she'ein nakov. If something is growing in an unperforated flower pot, tolosh gomeru, that is considered to be completely detached from the ground, and that indeed fits this criteria, and it can become huchshar lekabel tumah. So in summary, according to Reb Shimon, something growing even in an atetz nakov is considered to be detached when it comes to other halachas. It is strictly regarding this halacha that we consider to be mechuber lekarka because of the repetition in the pasuk. Continues the Gemara. Ba'amine hahu saba Reb Zera. So hahu saba, this certain elder, asked Reb Zera the following question. We know that according to Reb Shimon, something growing in an atetz nakov is still considered to be detached from the ground. What about the following case? Shoresh kineged nekev. What if we have the root directly opposite the hole? So it can draw sustenance directly from the earth. It's unobstructed, unblocked. Is Reb Shimon going to consider that root perhaps to be attached to the ground? Mali of Reb Shimon. What would Reb Shimon say in this case? Because it's drawing directly from the ground. Ishtik, he remained silent. He didn't respond. He was uncertain. Continues the Gemara, Zimna Chada. Another time, Ashkeche, so the same elder, he met Reb Zera, the Yosef Ekamar. He noticed, he encountered him sitting and saying over the following halach. Umayde Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon, although he holds something in an atetz nakov is considered to be detached, however, Reb Shimon will agree that if there's a large hole enough to be metayer the kli, to negate its utensil status, in that case, Reb Shimon would agree that anything growing within it is considered to be attached to the ground. Let's take a look at Rashi inside here. Right off to the left, the words beginning Bichdei Taharasa, says Rashi. So what kind of hole are we speaking about? A large enough hole that theoretically, Sheim Nitba, if this Kli would have been Tameh, Nitar B'Shvirazu, it's a large enough hole that would actually be Metayer, the Kli. V'hainu K'moitzi Zayis, referring to a hole which allows a olive to slip through. The Snan, Mesechas Kelim, as we learned in Mesechas Kelim, Kli Cheres ha'aseh la'oichlan, a earthenware Kli which is intended to hold solid foods. Until what point do we regard it as a utensil? Shiur kezesim, until it gets a hole large enough to allow the olive to fall through. So this is considered the kedei taharasei, a sufficient hole which would grant tahara to this Kli. It will render it obsolete, negate its utensil status. And Reb Zera said, Umayder Reb Shimon Baha? Reb Shimon would agree in this case, the Chashem Mechuber. Anything growing within is considered to be attached to the ground. The Sulo Yavakli, because it's no longer considered to be a utensil. So this was the statement that this elder hears Reb Zera saying. Reb Shimon would agree in this case that anything within this extensively punctured kli, is considered to be attached to the ground, even according to Reb Shimon. So he was perplexed. So this elder challenged Reb Zera. He said, I don't understand. Hashta sheirish keneged nekev boi menach. Now, when it came to my question, where the sheirish, the root, was directly opposite the hole. So although it was a very small hole, granted, it didn't have this advantage. It wasn't this large hole which allows the owl to fall through. But it had an advantage because it was directly opposite the hole and had the ability to draw sustenance directly, unobstructed, from the earth below. So I asked you, what is Allah in that case? And you didn't respond to me. You were uncertain. You were misupik there. So how come in this case are you so sure? Do you need to ask? Isn't it certain that you should have been uncertain in this case? Meaning that he viewed it as follows. He says, well, in my case, although it has a disadvantage, it's only a small hole, but it has an advantage that the root is drawing directly from the ground below because it's directly opposite the hole. Nevertheless, you are uncertain what Allah will be in that case according to Reb Shimon, whether it's considered to be attached or detached. So of course in the second case, you should have had the same suffix. You should have had uncertainty there as well. Why? Because although it was a larger hole, and the kli is considered to be obsolete, you negated its status, it's no longer considered to be halachically a vessel. Nevertheless, you applied this concept to everything within this container, even something which wasn't opposite that hole. So although there's an advantage here because it's a larger hole, but there's a disadvantage because the produce, which is not directly opposite the hole, which sustenance is obstructed, it's blocked. So it has a disadvantage here. So why were you so sure of yourself here? You should have had a suffix here as well. Of course in this case you should have had a suffix. So in each case there's a ma'ila and a chesarn. Once again, in the first case, it's a small hole, so it's a chesarn. But there's an advantage there because the root was directly opposite the hole. It could draw direct sustenance. In the second case, there's an advantage because it's a large hole. But there's a disadvantage because we're speaking about even produce, even something which isn't directly opposite the hole, which is being blocked from its sustenance. So how can you be so sure there? If you were unsure in my case, certainly you should have been sure unsure in that case as well. Amar Abaye, says Abaye, indeed, if this halacha was stated from Reb Zera, hachid itmar, this is how it was meant to be stated. Reb Shimon would agree. Sheim nikav lematim revis, if the hole that was punctured into this pot, into this atzitz nakav, happened lower than the revius point. So revius here is revius haluk. So underneath this hole, it doesn't have the ability to contain a revius. So it's below the revius mark in the kli. He agrees that a hole at this low point of the kli totally makes the kli obsolete. Rashi says, lav kliu. It negates it from the status of kli, and therefore, even according to Reb Shimon, anything growing within it is considered to be mechubel karka. So in summary, we learned about an atzit, a flower pot. So if it's einay nakav, if it has no puncture, no perforation, all agree that anything growing within it is considered to be detached from the ground, talish. What about an atzitz nakav that has a puncture? According to Chachamim, anything growing within it is considered to be mechubel karka. According to Reb Shimon, it is talish. We have two exceptions. Number one, regarding hechsher zroim, regarding enabling to be makabel tumah through getting wet. So something growing within this atzitz nakav is regarded as mechubel karka, even according to Reb Shimon, and cannot become hukshar, enabled to be makabel tumah. Abai concludes that if the hole is at a very low position in the kli, where the kli cannot contain a revius haluk beneath that hole, even according to Reb Shimon, the kli is regarded as obsolete, and anything growing within it is considered to be attached to the ground. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rava, Chamesh midos b'kli cheres. There are 5 measures when it comes to a kli cheres. There are 5 categories, halacha categories, depending on the size hole that the kli cheres receives. Continues the Gemara, Nikav kemoitzi mashke. What if the kli cheres was punctured with a very small hole? Kemoitzi mashke. It only allows some liquid to trickle out. Tor milatame gistra. So if we're speaking about a gisra, a shard, a piece of cheres, a piece of an earthenware kli, not a complete kli, but a piece of it, which is generally used to collect a dripping from another kli. So if this gisra itself became perforated with this small size hole, which allows liquid to trickle out, this gisra becomes nullified from its use, from its function. Tar milatame gisra cannot be mekabel tumah. Why? Because the person wouldn't place another receptacle under this receptacle. It's not done. Therefore, it's no longer fit for use, and it is not mekabel tumah. But if we're speaking about a complete kli, which is perforated in this manner, v'adayin kliu, it will still be considered to be a full-fledged kli. For instance, l'kadosh b'meichatos, for use in the process of being mekadosh, sanctifying the meichatos for the paraduma, where they would take spring water and collect it in a kli, and then they would go and put the ashes of paraduma. So we require a halachic kli in that context. This is considered to be a halachically valid kli, even though it has a small puncture which allows liquid to trickle out. It's still considered to be a kli regarding that halacha. So that's the first level, a small hole which allows water to trickle out. That only negates the gistra, but does not negate an entire kli. Continues Rava. What is the next level? Nikav kikoines mashke. What about a larger hole which allows water to seep into it? This is a larger hole. So if you place the kli on water, water would actually seep into the kli. In this case, we are certain that the water would actually trickle out in a much larger quantity, much quicker. In this case, it is not suitable to contain liquids. Tor l'kadosh b'meichatos is negated from being able to be used for kiddush meichatos. And as Taisus points out, certainly if this kli was designated to be used to contain liquids, it will not be mekabel tumah because it's unsuitable for that purpose. So this is level number 2, a hole large enough to allow water to seep into the kli. Nevertheless, v'adayin kli ul'achshe b'izroim, but it's still considered to be a kli pertaining to hechshe zroim. Anything growing within it is considered to be detached from the ground. This hole is not large enough to render the produce growing within it as attached to the ground. Is considered to be tolush, and if it gets wet, it could be mekabel tumah. The next level, nikav k'shorish katan. What if the hole is large enough for a shorish katan, the size of a small root? In this case, tor malachshe b'izraim. This kli becomes negated from being considered a kli. It's nullified from its kli status regarding hechshe zroim. So anything within it is considered to be attached to the ground mechubel karka and is not susceptible to tumah. However, v'adayin kli ul'kabel b'izeisim, but it's still suitable. It's still considered to be a kli within the category of a kli which is mekabel zeisim, meaning a kli which is intended to hold solids. In that case, we mentioned earlier, the only thing that nullifies it is if the hole is large enough to allow an olive to fall through. So this hole is certainly not that large. Therefore, it's still considered to be a kli regarding that category, regarding that status. V'adayin kliu l'kabel b'izeisim. Continues the Gemara. Nikav k'moitzi zeisim. What if the hole is large enough to allow the olives to fall through? Tor l'kabel b'izeisim. In this case, the kli is negated from the category of the vessels that are mekabel zeisim, meaning that if it was intended for holding ordinary solid food, then it's considered to be tar. It's not mekabel tumah any longer because it allows the olives to fall through. V'adayin kliu l'kabel b'rimayim. So if one designates it to contain pomegranates, so if he's miyachna for that purpose, it's considered to be a kli for that purpose, and therefore, even if it has a large enough hole to allow the olives to fall through, it could still be mekabel tumah. What about nikav k'moitzi rimayim? If it got a large enough hole to allow the rimayim to fall through, tar miklum is completely tar, negated, and nullified from its kli status. Continues the Gemara. What if it was covered up, sealed with a seal? In this case, it has the ability to protect its contents, even if it's sitting in a oil mace under the same roof of a mace. So we know the halacha is that klicheres that is properly sealed, it can protect its content from the tumah which is prevalent under the roof, even if he's sitting under the same roof as a mace. So even if it has a large hole, the tumah does not enter unless most of it broke off. Continues the Gemara, Amar Avasi. Shamati, I heard, that what is the sheer of the perforation of a klicheres? To negate it if it allows a rimon to fall through. Amar lei Rava. So Rava responded, Shemalei Shamata. Ela mukav tzamet pasel. Perhaps what you heard pertains to this halacha of mukav tzamet pasel. The klicheres that contains content in the oil mace is trying to protect its content from tumah. In that case, if the hole is large enough to allow a rimon to fall through, then the seal is considered to be ineffective and it doesn't protect its contents any longer. Says the Gemara, Rav da Amar, Mukav Tzamet Pasel Ashi Yifachis Rubai. Rav himself just stated for us that the halacha when it comes to Tzamet Pasel is Ashi Yifachis Rubai. That you need that most of the kli should break off. A hole large enough to allow a pomegranate to fall through is not sufficient. Says Marloi Kash, it's not difficult. It depends what size kli we're speaking about. Habaravi. If we're speaking about a large size kli, then indeed you need most of it to break apart. V'habazutri. The halacha of Maitzi Riman, which negates the Tzamet Pasel, is speaking about a small size kli. In that case, even the hole which allows a rimun to fall through will negate the kli status, and it can no longer protect its contents, even with the seal with the Tzamet Pasel. Now, it's not clear exactly what's considered to be large or small. Some Mepharshim say that Zutri means small, means that if the hole which allows the rimun to fall through encompasses most of the kli, and the Ravavi, a large size kli, means that the hole the size of a rimun will only take up half or less of the kli. Okay, in any case, we have a listing of various punctures and their resulting halachos. We began with the klicheres that received a puncture which is moitzi mashke, only allows some water to trickle out. It is tar migistera. If there's a small piece of cheres, a shard, then is no longer suitable and is tar. The next level is koines mashke. If the puncture allows water to actually seep into the kli, in that case it is nullified from being used for liquid, and it cannot be used in the process of kiddush mechatos. What if the hole is large enough for a small root? Then anything within it is considered to be connected to the ground when it comes to hechsher zraim, that is not susceptible to tumah, and even if it gets wet, it is not unable to mekabel tumah. What about if the kli has a puncture which allows olives to fall through? Then it is tar from a ordinary kli. It is not considered to be a standard kli. We're speaking of a standard kli which is meant to contain solids. It is no longer mekabel tumah since it allows the olives to fall through. What about a larger hole which is mitzvah remaining pomegranates? In this case, it is tar even if the kli was designated to be used as a container of pomegranates. And finally, we have the halacha of mukav tzamet pasel, that a klicheres which is protected, which is sealed with a solid seal, it protects its content in an oil and mace. So if it becomes punctured, the Gemara tells us, the final version of the Gemara is that if it's a large size kli, then most of it needs to break off. And if it's a smaller size kli, even if the puncture is large enough to allow the pomegranate to fall through, it no longer protects its content in the oil hames. Okay, let's make a quick chazara of today's blot. We began with the three cases of koicheles, applying the eye pain, goideles, braiding your hair, and paikeses, spinning your hair. According to Blazer, these three are considered to be malachis. According to Chamim, they are merely isurim midrabanan. What type of malachis is entailed according to Blazer? Well, the paint entails tzeveya, braiding and spinning of the hair entails the malacha of baina, as the Gemara brought a raya from Adam Arishan, where Hashem braided Chana and used the term vayiven to describe it. The Gemara proceeded with three more activities. Chaylev, milking an animal, that is a talad of dash. Mechabetz, processing the cheese, separating the whey, the liquid, that is a form of boirer. And megavin, forming the blocks of cheese, that is a form of boina. Then we have another three cases which are actually a subject of a machlekes. You know, Blazer, who regards them as a malach, and the chacham who say he is potter. What are those three things? Mechabed, a person sweeps his earthen floor. Contra Blazer, that's considered to be boina. Merabitz, he sprinkles the liquid to have the dust lay down. That's considered to be boina because he's smoothing out the floor. And finally, roide chalis dvash, removing those honeycombs from the beehive. According to Eliezer, that's considered to be a toilish. According to Chacham, on all three accounts, he's putter. The Gemara actually told us that Merabitz is mutal chatchila if he does it derech rechitza. And finally, according to Reb Shimon, who holds Davish and Miskavan as mutter, he's allowed to do this even lechatchila because he has no intention of flattening out his floor. And even though it happens incidentally, it's a Davish and Miskavan, and it is mutter lechatchila. We proceeded with the halacha of an atzitz, a flower pot. So if it has no perforation, all agreed, anything within it is considered to be tolish, detached from the ground. If it is an atzitz nakav, then according to Rabban, anything growing within it is considered to be mechubel karka. So if a person plucks something from this atzitz, he is considered to have done a malacha on Shabbos. According to Reb Shimon, anything growing within an atzitz, even an atzitz nakav, is considered to be detached from the ground. I have two exceptions. One is when it comes to hechsher zroim, something growing within this atzitz nakav is considered to be mechubel karka, and not susceptible to tumah. And Abaye told us if the hole is actually located below the revius mark, even according to Reb Shimon, anything growing within it is considered to be mechubel karka. Finally, we learned many categories of kli cheres depending on the size hole it receives. If it's merely a small hole which allows liquid to trickle out, that doesn't nullify a complete kli. It only nullifies a gistra. If it allows water to actually seep in, that nullifies the kli which is designated for liquid. If it has a hole large enough for a root, then anything growing within it is considered to be mechubel karka when it comes to hechsher zroim. It is not susceptible to tumah. If the kli has a large enough hole which allows a olive to slip through, then it is no longer considered to be a kli when it comes to a container which is meant to hold solids. If it was designated to hold pomegranates, then the shear is a nekev large enough to allow a pomegranate to fall through. And finally, when it comes to halacha protecting its content in an oil hametz, if it's a large kli, then if most of it breaks apart, it is nullified. If it is a small kli, then the criterion is whether the hole is large enough to allow a remain to slip through.